Done.
So
You can start now.
wonderful. All right. Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining in. And so we jump into the presentation, and I hope I'm audible. And kindly reserve your questions. And I wish this could be interactive, but I think I'll try and go through the PPT. And what we could do is Aditi will moderate and take your questions, and perhaps we can have a discussion thereon. And commencing with my presentation. There you go. And thank you, Simply Sports, and the entire team, and Aditi, and everybody here. Of course, Mansi also has been coordinating for this. Thanks a lot for that. And this is definitely, I would love to for it to have been an interactive session, but yes, I think the only way forward is to do this PPT, and then we will take questions. Can I request the audience to mute your background so that, there's no disturbance?
Tanas, can you mute? Yeah, okay. Everybody, please. Thank you.
Great. So officially, in a month's time, I begin my 21st year, and I think I passed out in 2003. That was my master's, and so very fortunate that I've always been juggling nutrition and of course the anecdote of a year ago, the most important of all. I was invited by our IOC directors to participate in a conference where I was a presenter and a part of a roundtable discussion, and I was talking about how sports nutrition has changed in India, where we do not have, say, a coach or somebody who is a non-dietitian gives, sports nutrition advice, which was pretty much the norm. And we've still not come of age where a dietitian is a part of a team and where we travel with the team and work with athletes very closely. So that's still a new practice. But I was very fortunate to be a part of this. But today we discuss and understand what is polycystic ovary syndrome, how is that we are able to manage PCOS through food and lifestyle. I'm sure some of our participants already know what polycystic ovary is, and where we have small little cysts or these little disturbances, and due to which there is irregular ovulation. So polycystic ovary is a complicated hormonal imbalance, or kind of a medical issue that can crop up in young girls once you start menstruation, menarche, where either there is a delay in the onset of the menstruation itself, or sometimes because these cysts make it difficult for you to menstruate or ovulate itself, then there is an irregular menstruation, and that can have a very manifold or ripple effect with the entire metabolic pathways. So we will see in the next slide that the several issues that females can face because of this hormonal imbalance is one, because there is a lack of regular secretion of estrogen. When you ovulate, you have these female hormones that are normally produced by the body, so due to which there can be an increase in the male hormone, which is testosterone. So these hormonal imbalances can lead to typically common symptoms observed in this particular condition is acne, okay, which are basically eruptions on your face or otherwise in different parts of the body. Hirsutism is basically facial hair, and young children can be impacted by this because it's also of an aesthetic value, where children have a lot of growth on their face and they may need to regularly take their facial hair off. And the challenge of insulin insensitivity, or slightly increased weight, which can also be the problem. And managing that itself can be complementary to this whole metabolic problem. And of course, the lack of menstruation, and when ovulation does not occur, estrogen has several important functions in the body, and we will learn of it in the coming slide. And of course, if you are in the biological cycle or are looking to go the family way, pregnancy can be challenging because you may not regularly ovulate, and due to which means the ova or the egg itself is not formed, and thereby, if there are weight issues, conceiving and making babies can become problematic for these women. So going to the next slide, whatever is happening. Okay, all right. So we just discussed of, how these hormones can make it more challenging. And what we call this is insulin resistance, where you may be producing, your pancreas is one organ in the body, and it will be producing a hormone which is important for your energy uptake, or, whatever you eat, the digestion process of where glucose is formed, the way glucose is used as an end product. For example, it's the currency of the body, like you transact with money. So similarly in the body, we are transacting with glucose, or that is what gives us the energy. So the pancreas perhaps may be producing enough insulin, but due to these elevated androgens, which are male hormones, which is testosterone in females, this can cause a bit of a resistance, or what we call as, with the adipose tissue, meaning that the fat in the body is also very high. And if the weight is a concern, the insulin is produced by the pancreas, which is an organ, but the uptake of it can suffer, and the cells do not respond to it effectively. And that has got a vicious cycle, and due to which, you may have a cascading effect of how this entire syndrome plays up, and we call it as a metabolic syndrome or a syndrome X. Typically there is dyslipidemia, you may have high cholesterol, and classically weight is high, so there is low grade inflammation, insulin resistance. So there are several parameters that can kind of play a role here, and that makes it very complicated. Now, what happens in PCOS is we see polycystic ovary syndrome even in adolescents. And I am working with, thankfully, a few clients, which gives me a leeway, or in practice, I am able to adapt to these theory suggestions and scientific papers on how we are able to assist and guide these, young children or females or athletes. Now, when we look at, your entire body mass itself, what happens classically is we are so focused on just the body weight, but it is not just the body weight, because what we really need to focus is on not just the weight, but our ideal aim should be to consider lowering the fat mass, the adiposity, meaning even the central adiposity, what we talk of being very heavy in the abdomen, versus increasing the muscle mass, which is the crux of increasing your metabolic rate. So, and we are a play of several intricate hormones in the body. And I just talked to you of the main important role that estrogen plays as a female hormone in, not, we'll also discuss that in the few slides going ahead. Estrogen is not just for the bones, and it has several different functions, but of course, with inflammation, long-term stress hormone as cortisol or elevated testosterone, similarly even your thyroid. So all of these can influence your body mass, and that is meaning that it can be the fat percentage and the muscle mass. And menarche is when a girl starts a menstruation, and estrogen is not just an anabolic hormone in females, but it is also a hormone that can increase your fat mass gradually. And with all the other metabolic challenges, this can just get amplified or make it a little more challenging for those who are undergoing PCOS. So as I was suggesting, our focus should be on, weight bearing exercise in a way, and managing the food in order to increase the muscle mass. And I think somewhere we misconstrue or convey the wrong message when we keep conveying the message of managing body weight. But I think emphatically, I'd like to say that, our focus should be on muscle building and lowering the fat mass. And how do we do this? There are several approaches, and as a thumb rule, we know that there is, insulin resistance and hyperinsulinemia, meaning that because of these elevated hormones, where the uptake of these glucose is not occurring, the pancreas is really going all out and pushing to increase a lot of insulin release. But that may not help, because there is a resistance in the cells itself to take this. So the ideal way to and the only way to manage this is through food and lifestyle, because there is no treatment for polycystic ovary syndrome. And as a blanket rule, the management includes avoiding insulin spikes. And the only way to do that is managing food that may not increase your blood sugar levels, as is with any other metabolic challenge, which is also insulin in pre-diabetes, what we see, or diabetes. So now when we say that we need to look at food which can be nourishing but will not increase the blood sugars, so it's a very complicated situation. And how can we achieve this? So one way is to look at your calorie intake by itself, and calorie by itself is not a stand-alone entity. Many times what girls do is in the with the objective of increasing, or that is increasing their weight loss, they start focusing a lot on consuming lesser quantity of food or less food. And perhaps that may not be a very well what do you say, well adapted approach. What is important here is you need to ensure that you are planning this scientifically in a way that you're not overcutting your calorie intake. Weight loss is a priority, but nonetheless, if you are going to thwart your intake of your food itself to lower than 5 grams of carbohydrate per kg body weight, or even lesser than 30 calories per kg body weight. Sorry, now 30 calories will be for fat-free mass. That will be lean body mass, not the overall weight. So there are scientific guidance on how we do these calculations as a ballpark point. So one is to look at reducing your calorie intake in a larger perspective. But apart that, understanding where do these carbohydrates come from? In the food, we have basically foods that are carbohydrate foods, meaning your rice, roti, and so on, which we will just discuss in just a few seconds. But apart your macronutrients, that is your carbohydrates, proteins, which come from your eggs and milk and so on. And then you have your fat, which is, you have the visible fat, which comes from what the fat that you add. And then you also have certain hidden sources of fats. So, but the proteins and the fats do not impact insulin or your blood sugars. What really impacts this is only pure carbohydrates. Now, where do these carbohydrates come from, and how do you kind of plan the intake of these carbs is what is crucial to this management of the condition. Now, as we all know, your grains, okay, it could be any form of a grain, and any processed cereal, from your flour to bread to processed foods, biscuits, pasta, all of these are carbohydrate foods. And from millets, grains like your brown rice, quinoa, amaranth, which is rajgira, all of these are different examples of grains. And in PCOS, since we know that it is the grains or your carbohydrate which directly impacts your insulin, you have to be cognizant of the fact that you definitely want to look at a low or a moderate amount of glycemic index, meaning those foods which are slow to digest and will not lead to insulin spikes. And that way you will be able to avoid, the complications, because there's already hyperinsulinemia, and that can make the condition worse. So one option to do is, instead of choosing certain foods which are highly processed, choose grains which are unpolished and unprocessed, meaning they are whole and untouched. Similarly, you also get carbohydrates. So I don't know if there are a lot of non-science or non-nutritionists who are participating today. I understand that we have a bunch of nutritionists and dietitians. So this education is not directed for them, but for the others who may not be so well read about nutrition. Now, carbohydrate foods are grains, but however, dals are also predominantly carbohydrates, meaning if a 30 grams of raw rice will give you 15 grams of carbs, around that, typically a 30 grams of a dal raw weight will also give you approximately 15 grams of carb, meaning that if you are choosing, say, polished dals over certain pulses like chana, chole, rajma, moong with the skin on, the digestion is faster, and predominantly, yes, they may offer 7 grams of protein, They're low in quality of protein and they lack methionine, but however, they're also carb heavy. So carbohydrates also comes from these dals, and the ones who are looking to manage their PCOS must avoid or refrain from choosing these dals. And in the end, I'll also give you tips on how you can consume these fruits, dals, or even white rice if you do occasionally, if you're traveling and you, for unavoidable reasons, if you are consuming some of these foods. The only way to do this is a mix and match in a way that you will lower the glycemic index, meaning that you will make these carbohydrates absorb slower so that your body is not going to be subjected to an insulin spike. So similarly, fruits also offer carbohydrate, and that fruit is sugar is called as fructose. These simple sugars, what comes from a table sugar, which is cane sugar or a sugar cane, which is powdered, the juice is powdered like jaggery or a sugar, that also is carbohydrate. So the fructose of a fruit is also a simple sugar and can really enhance the uptake. And that is why we say avoid fruit juices where you are peeling off all the fibers of the fruit and you are consuming it as a beverage where you are going to lead to an insulin spike directly. And that is not what you want to do. So fruits again have a varying carbohydrate content, and a very sweet fruit as say a banana or mango can give you anywhere upwards 20-25 grams of carbohydrate for a large banana or a fruit which is, say mango. So you need to be clever in choosing fruits which are low in sweetener, meaning that when you eat fruits, you just choose fruits which are, say, a muskmelon or a papaya, orange, apple, the ones that have more fibrous content and they have lesser sweetness in them as a thumb rule. And that can be a good way to choose your fruits when you consume them on a day to day basis. Similarly, we have vegetables which are roots, and these can be potato, carrots, anything as sweet potato. Of course, sweet potato is a moderate GI; it is slightly slowly digested. So these also offer carbohydrates, and when you choose to eat these kind of vegetables, mix them in a mixed meal, which is classically our Indian thali, where you have a rice or a roti and a dal and dahi and vegetables. So always remember that you would like to choose to blend or mix some of these vegetables in other non-starchy vegetables, and that will be your green leafy vegetables, it could be your beans, cauliflower, and so on, where you are not consuming only the starchy vegetables, but in a way that these carbohydrate rich foods will be moderated. And lastly, you also get carbohydrates from milk, and that's called as lactose. Now, a glass of milk also can give you roughly about 15 grams of carbohydrate. And in the end, if you have questions, I'd be very happy to address. Should you avoid dairy in PCOS? That's a very interesting question, and there is no yes or no answer to that. But yeah, it really depends on your individual need, and we don't necessarily have to avoid dairy. It's very subjective, but yes, you do get carbohydrates from dairy, and roughly about a glass can give you 15 grams of carbohydrate. So the takeaway here was to choose pulses over dal, whole grains over white rice or pasta, fruits which are or rather low in sweet taste, and vegetables as non-starchy vegetables. One important thing to remind you here is also the processing, meaning that a simple cooking of the meal itself can impact the way your body absorbs carbohydrate. So you will definitely want to avoid processed flours, which are fast digesting, or for that matter, even cooking a certain amount of the grain or a vegetable itself can soften the fiber, or it can even increase the starch from the cells, and that is called as a process of gelatinization. For example, if you had to eat a ragi kanji prior to your training, and if you actually cook it, the starch releases through the process of cooking it called gelatinization, and that itself can increase your uptake of your glucose, and that will lead to insulin spike. So maybe one way you could look at how you can avoid processing is Certain foods can be consumed raw. It can be an overnight oats. Oats is already a moderate GI food. It's slow digesting. And you could look at consuming slightly unripe variety of a fruit where the fructose has not fully the ripening process leads to a release of fructose, whereas the starch is more when it is slightly unripe. Or instead of certain cooking processes, as I said, you could avoid cooking, and that way the release of the starch is very gradual in the process of digestion, where your body has to work harder. So, and of course, not to forget the most important part, which I will explain in just a bit, adding more fats and protein to the diet. We'll come to that in just a bit. However, a high fiber intake also leads to a lot of flatus, what we commonly call as gas. Now, any high fiber food has something called as an insoluble fiber, meaning parts of the plant which are not digested because we are not ruminants or cows and we lack that enzyme, meaning that these foods reach the large intestine and that is where they start fermenting and release methane and carbon dioxide and hydrogen. And that will lead to a lot of bloating, particularly if you don't consume enough water. So those who are on a high fiber diet, which what a PCOS case needs, high fiber diet does lead to a lot of gas. So one thing to remember is always remember to space the high fiber through the meals. For example, if you're doing a raw salad, please don't do the raw salad and brown rice and chana in the same meal. You would like to distribute these fibers in different meals. For example, if you want to do a fruit or a salad, you may want to do that in lunch, but you may want to add some beans in your breakfast. When I say beans, I'm referring to pulses. So similarly, if you want a slow digesting grain, maybe you will add a quinoa in the night. So that way you are kind of matching and you are using a bit of a, manipulation skill here in how you can add fibers through the day so that you're not inconvenienced with a lot of flatus or gas and bloating, which can be quite uncomfortable if you do a high fiber diet. So now the ones that we want to avoid, which I already was giving you examples, you definitely will look to refrain or restrict from these options which are highly processed. So one is definitely your white sugar or your table sugar, any form of a sweetener that can lead to very severe insulin spike, white rice, which is easily digested, or certain products like maida and so on, which are, firstly, they are baked. So they are very high in trans fats. And there is already a challenge of an inflammation in PCOS. But however, you would definitely want to avoid these processed sugary and refined grains, which can lead to other problems. So similarly, as the previous slide, what you would like to also avoid is certain refined oils, which are very high in omega-6. And that can be your simple sunflower oil, which is extremely high in omega-6, because we want to look at pro omega-3, the ones that can lower inflammation and not the ones that can add to inflammation. That is like adding fuel to fire. Similarly, your baked goodies, maida, lots of sugar content, red meats, or for that matter, even a lot of your processed meats as your sausages and cold cuts, where there's a lot of, preservatives used as, nitrites or any of these processed foods further, which can aggravate. And besides red meat, also we know like these oils are rich in omega-6. Baked goods are rich in trans fats, which can further make the inflammation worse. Similarly, the red meats have a lot of creatine, or they have certain saturated fats, which can make matters go back to worse. So you may want to indulge in them occasionally, just if you'd like to, at your discretion, but never go overboard with these. Now, the more apart choosing the type of carbohydrate, what is important is also matching adequate amounts of protein in the meal. And now by default, we know that you may want anywhere between 0.8 to 1 gram and go all the way upwards to 2, even maybe 2.5 or 3 gram need-based for each, kg body weight. So for example, if I had to say you need about, say, roughly a 50 kg person, or let's say 55 or 60, which is an adult female, you will need 60 grams of protein minimum. But if you are looking at cutting your carbohydrate intake, automatically the amount of protein needs to go up, because carbohydrates are energy givers. And in a restricted calorie intake, you by default have to enhance your protein. Otherwise, you're going to go into a slump of a metabolic rate, and you do not want that, because a lot of clients and athletes make a mistake of doing very low calorie diets, VLCDs, and that is not sustainable. And the way to kind of, use your planning methodologies is to ensure that when you have adequate protein, it can be even 1.5. And trust me, when I say this, being also mostly vegetarian, there's always a challenge of getting even, say, that 15 grams of protein. And if you see the theoretical suggestions based on the age, the older you get, the higher the protein needs to go up. And we have a lot of research evidences, or conclusive data to say that you could even do upwards of 30 grams in one meal. So the takeaway message here is you want to distribute about, say, 20-30 grams of protein in 3 to 4 meals across the entire 24 hours, particularly if you work out. So focus on high quality protein, and that comes from either dairy, eggs, or non-veg foods, and that can be chicken and lean meat as fish. Choose fatty fish or oily fish like sardines, mackerel, Indian salmon, which have omega-3 in them. And we'll talk of omega-3 also in just a bit, because omega-3 are basically anti-inflammatory foods, and you don't get them in mostly vegetarian food, and the absorption and the conversion obviously is very challenging. It can be 5 to 15% only. Like walnuts, you may ask me, why not walnuts or chia seeds? But the conversion, please remember, alpha linolenic acid to the DHA, or the the potent form of the omega-3 is extremely poor in the body, and obviously you may need larger amounts of vegetarian form of a omega-3. So oily fish or a marine fish is the only best source of the potent EPA DHA, that is the omega-3 in the body, and that's needed for not just inflammation reduction, for your immunity, for your brain function. A part of your brain is also DHA. So, and again, quantity, this can vary. For example, if you want to, you're a vegetarian and you don't consume dairy, if you're lactose intolerant, and the only way is to get it through either soy-based product or through dals. And if I'm looking at 20 grams, you will have to eat 300 grams of chole or rajma, which is like one large bowl. And not to mention, I talked to you of how fibers can lead to flatus. So you have to be kind of scientific, or just be aware of how you can consume these kind of portions. So consuming egg whites or eggs, and again, if you have, there's already dyslipidemia in PCOS, and you must also be aware of how much cholesterol from the dietary intake can be consumed, right? Because you may consume seafood, prawns, or red meat occasionally. So that way you need to be aware of how much cholesterol can you consume on a day-to-day basis from these non-vegetarian foods. But overall, you would like to look at lean protein, which is chicken and fish, and not to mention the timing. You need to distribute enough protein with every meal. And adding protein is the only way to manage blood sugars, because proteins not only increase satiety hormone called ghrelin, they also have a satiating impact, meaning that they make you crave for food in lesser amounts, meaning that they have a way they make you feel fuller. So digestion takes longer because it's got a thermic effect. So obviously the tendency of sugar cravings and the tendency of snacking comes down. So, and not to mention that, yeah, the only way to avoid these insulin spikes is through adding high quality and high amount of protein in every meal, along with the high fiber. So here you have the protein again. I was just explaining this, example of how dals or pulses also have very high carbohydrate, and not to mention that they also come with a whole lot of fiber, which can cause a lot of gas. Whereas if you do the lean protein like chicken or fish, it is easier to get 20-25 grams by just eating a small, say a chicken breast, or just about 100 odd grams of just the pure, the non-veg or the chicken part of it, minus the bones, is what I'm referring to. And how PCOS has inflammation. And, we want to definitely look at foods that can lower inflammation. And so these can be very helpful, because we know that green tea has the strongest catechins, and the EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate, is one of the most potent. It could be green tea, lemon tea, black tea, oolong tea. So black tea has theaflavin, whereas turmeric has curcumin. Also remember, turmeric also has a lot of oxalates and other anti-nutritional properties. So the right way to use turmeric is to boil it thoroughly, so that cooking can lower these some of these interactions, and use it with a pinch of pepper and oil, because curcumin absorbs only in the presence of oil on cooking, with a bit of pepper. And not to mention, curcumin is the most potent, the pigment of turmeric. So, what I think, a half teaspoon may not even give you 200 mg of curcumin. And if you recollect, during COVID, when people had in pandemic, a lot of people were going overboard and consuming a lot of vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D, and curcumin extract, and that could be what, about 500 mg, even 1000 mg. So you can imagine it may be very hard to get that from the turmeric by itself. You may have had to eat, like, I don't know, 2-3 teaspoons of turmeric if you do the theory calculations. And of course, a similar approach to blood sugar management, what is classically seen in pre-diabetes or diabetes, you want to use Ceylon cinnamon, because we know that Ceylon cinnamon, fenugreek, bitter gourd, which has charantinus plant insulin, and basic, some of these things can help you manage, blood sugars. And Ceylon cinnamon is better, because the regular cinnamon, what you get, the bark of a tree, is very high in coumarin, or the anti-nutritional property, and it's not safe. So you may want to use at least about a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, which is a Sri Lankan cinnamon, and does not have an anti-nutritional property. So this also can help manage PCOS symptoms. And not to mention the importance of serotonin. So here I have a picture of a curd rice. You will have to ignore the rice, the white rice part of it. What I was conveying was our Indian foods like dahi, which is curd, are very rich in fermented, or the live bacteria. These fermented foods itself is good in so many ways that, and even the pickle, the fermentation process, you don't have to do necessarily an Indian pickle. Even a fermented overnight rice, or sauerkraut, which is fermented cabbage. I've tried making it once at home. I did not succeed. But of course, you have store-bought, sauerkraut, or you have pickles, which are in brine, which is salt water. All these are fermented foods, and the easiest way to get is fermented, dahi, kefir, or any form of these foods, which increase the load of the probiotics, or the good bacteria. Another way to get certain amount of this bacteria is by adding prebiotic fiber, and that can be through onions and use of garlic. Similarly, you can use resistant starch, meaning you cook the rice, you allow it to cool, and the starch converts to resistant starch, meaning that the body will not absorb. That way, you'll cut the calorie intake in PCOS also. And plantains, cooled rice, cooled potatoes, thereby you are actually lowering the uptake of that starch and the glucose. So that can be another way to manage, your insulin spike, and also add these good fibers and probiotic foods. We know that can improve the gut health, and we know today by microbiota, where we say that the way you react, they say that your gut is your second brain. And we know that for sure, by increasing the gut health, the only way to do that is increasing the variety of your foods. Never eat the same grain, never eat the same pulse, never eat the same vegetable or fruit. Go seasonal, and try and vary it day-to-day basis to week on week. I know some of them make a mistake and stick to the same capsicum. You tell them to change the vegetable, there is no other vegetable that exists beyond capsicum, or one cucumber, or if they do one rice, brown rice, they'll stick to the same rice. What you get from ragi, say, as your fiber or a calcium, you may not get by consuming, say, a quinoa, which may be higher in protein content. Similarly, if you eat an almond, you're getting vitamin E, but eating a walnut gives you omega-3, which is ALA. So every different food has a different nutrient, which you will not get by consuming the same ingredient for the rest of your life. So one way to enhance your gut microbiome or the good bacteria itself is varying your diet, eat local, eat seasonal, and that is the only way forward. And what these probiotics do is, from the pandemic itself, of the gut and the lung axis, it improves your upper respiratory tract infection, it has immune boosting property, it has gut and brain axis, meaning you kind of feel calmer when you have a good flora, or your microbiome or the bacteria in your gut is changing. And in many way it can impact your health subtly. They're all indirect ways, but yes, probiotics do improve your overall well-being in the way that they lower inflammation, and that is why that these fermented foods can be a value addition. Similarly, apple cider vinegar, balsamic vinegar, any vinegar, so adding fiber, good amount of non-starchy vegetables with high amount of protein in the diet along with a vinegar can be helpful for managing PCOS symptom. Also, coming to the most important aspect of exercise, and how can you look at increasing your muscle mass and lowering
Geetha,
your
I
fat.
just wanted to quickly tell you we're at 4:45. Just wanted to do a time check.
Yeah, good idea. I think we're almost done.
Okay, cool.
Thanks a lot. So making weight itself is it is a very slow and a gradual process. So focus on muscle building. Definitely look at very scientific training periodization. So the only way to do this is through muscle building, and muscles are built only with body weight exercise, strength training, calisthenics. It could be a Surya Namaskar, jumping rope, pull-ups, push-ups. You don't need to be going to a gymnasium. But how you could do this is by revving up your metabolic rate. And metabolic rate is directly influenced by the amount of muscle mass that you are trying to build. Even high intensity HIIT can be a way where you have a kind of influence on your metabolic rate several hours after you finish exercising. Now, exercise is another very, very crucial lifestyle change in PCOS management, because when you consume your food and you have the food that is digested and released as glucose is directly going to be influenced by your insulin released by pancreas. Exercise itself can improve insulin sensitivity for the reason, even for several hours and days after you do your exercise or physical activity, because there is only certain limited amount of carbohydrate available in the liver. So after a point of exercise, after 1 hour, when your liver glycogen is low, all right, the body also looks at other metabolism where you are converting certain free fatty acids or amino acids for conversion of that glucose, so that the body can consume that energy continually. And independent of the insulin, when you exercise, you are stimulating that muscle to directly take the glucose from the blood, because a working muscle or a exercising part of the body starts consuming the glucose, and that way your blood sugars also can be managed. And not to mention that the working muscle itself is clearing all that accumulated glucose, because insulin is not effective in PCOS, and that way you have better tolerance to this entire blood sugar management or the insulin resistance. However, do remember, I have noticed in my practice, everybody focuses a lot on only carbohydrate, and then they start lowering its intake without understanding that there may be days when you exercise, you need more carbohydrate, versus sometimes when you don't exercise, you don't need to be going overboard with carbohydrate. So carbohydrate cycling is, I think, very crucial, particularly in athletes, based on your training load and the number of hours that you will do. Now, coming to the female athlete triad, if you cut your calorie intake too much and you have something called as low energy availability, which I started off right in my first slide, of how relative energy deficiency, or that is REDs, that itself can lead to a lot of challenges, and low energy, not to mention inadequate food, can lower your metabolic rate, and that is counterproductive. But also your hormones and your body to menstruate itself, you need to be giving it enough energy. And that is where amenorrhea or a loss of menstrual cycle can occur. If the training load is very high, stress hormone or cortisol is very high, automatically you're going to challenge this condition and not be help you will not be helping this entire menstrual cycle period. Not to mention that, of course, if you're not menstruating, automatically there's a risk of your bone health, and we'll learn about that in just a bit. So relative energy deficiency in sport is quite a challenge, especially if you are in aesthetic sports or athletes are not eating enough. There's a direct impact on the menstrual cycle, less of calorie and food, and estrogen is secreted around the ovulation time when it peaks, or rather estrogen goes up, and that's when the ovulation or the the egg is released. All right. And estrogen itself is very crucial for well-being because it is heart protective in women. And until you have menopause, where you actually stop menstruating 45 to 50 years of age, up to the age that is from menarche, anywhere upwards. Now, of course, it's preceding and it can be earlier. So anywhere from 10, 11 years up and about 13 years, some children have late menstruation. That is when you start, and that's menarche. So from then on, till you are menstruating, you have higher muscle mass, because just like how males have testosterone, females also have estrogen, which is, muscle enhancing, heart protective, and not to mention it takes care of your bone mineral density. And most of the bone formation occurs up to 20 years of age only for the rest of your life. So these are extremely important years where your bone formation is occurring. And as you are nearing after the cycle that I was talking to you, where you are going through the follicular phase up to your formation of the egg, where you ovulate, and then after which is your second half of the menstrual cycle. And as you are nearing to expect the next menstrual cycle, certain hormones change. So estrogen peaks at ovulation time, and thereafter it falls. So obviously, as the lower estrogen, you have other parameters which are also changing, and that can be a low serotonin. It's a feel good hormone. You obviously have a craving to eat, and athletes have to take care because there's a lower thirst sense. So you have to ensure good hydration strategies. And there are ways you can increase the I know by evidence that there is a suggestion, if you consume phytoestrogen is certain foods which give you estrogen, and those are plant foods. Typically, we know it is soy-based products. Soya by itself is got a lot of anti-nutritional property. It's also high fat. So a processed defatted soy is good. Soy milk, tofu, fermented is the best, which is tempeh. And of course, the fresh edamame beans. These are all soy based products which are very high in plant estrogen. And an average guideline is you can consume up to 25 grams, meaning roughly about 40 to 50 grams of tempeh or soy granules can be taken. And that is a good way to add some estrogen in irregularities of menstrual cycle or in PCOS. Similarly, 1 to 2 tablespoons of mildly roasted flaxseed, because they have an anti-nutritional property called the cyanide. This can be roasted, and you can powder it fresh, otherwise it will not be digested. And don't powder large amounts, because then the omega-3 in it and can also perish with gradual time. So small amounts can be consumed, and on a regular basis, that is about 1 to 2 tablespoons, that is 30 grams. And not to overlook sleep. In my practice, I do see sleep as a big challenge. So sleep has a direct impact on increasing the satiety hormone called leptin. And also, I told you, protein is one way to suppress ghrelin. Another way to do that is by exercise. Ideally, weight-bearing exercise and not cardio. Cardio increases ghrelin. So sleep is extremely crucial. And also for recovery of athletes where growth hormone releases and you have, some recovery aspects. One way, another that you can address this challenge is avoiding phthalates and bisphenol, which are classically found in plastics. So if you use cooking utensils, please stick to glass, or you have your ceramic bowls or steel, what we typically used in our ancient time, I think brass and copper I've seen in my mom's place. So you can stick to those natural metals and glass, and avoid these plastic containers, especially if you microwave or carry hot food in a tiffin. Not to mention, you want to lower stress, because cortisol can make inflammation worse. So strategies where you are able to offload is very crucial to this inflammation condition. We know there are several nutritional deficiencies, and that is why I emphatically highlighted that you need to consume good amounts of, a balanced diet in terms of food groups, which is fruits, vegetables, where you get your high amount of antioxidants. And by research, we know that vitamin D is not just a vitamin, but a hormone which has an impact on neuromuscular function, not to mention weight loss, enhancing muscle mass, and PCOS management. And today we know that vitamin D is important for managing blood sugars, managing diabetes, for managing IBS, fibromyalgia, arthritis. I think this is like a skipper, an all-round player. So without which, again, PCOS can be challenging. So in the end, I think the overall perspective of putting 1+1 together, parts of the puzzle, focus on slow digesting carbohydrate, low GI, high protein. You have to look at high fiber diet. Nutritional deficiencies can be addressed, because we also know calcium helps increase fat excretion, thereby lowering fat mass. And then to work with education and a hand-holding from a qualified dietitian and clinicians. Definitely look at lifestyle adaptation to lower stress, exercise, and focusing on the right strategies of muscle building. Take a protein supplement when needed if you have low intake of protein. Particularly vegetarians have low amount of iron, B12, vitamin D, and protein itself. And the gradual approach to muscle building, which should be the right way. So these are my handles. For those of you who would like to keep in touch, please do visit and follow my these handles. And I'm handing back to Aditi, considering we started late, over whatever 5 minutes, or not bad. We've had some few minutes to take questions. So over to Aditi. Thanks for your patience, guys, though all those of you who were tuned in. Can I stop recording?
You could keep it going, because we might get some good questions which we want to maybe see. Yes, we have our first question. It's come from Bhagyashri. She's asking how to exactly decide the quantity.
Quantity? What quantity?
Bhagyashri, you can unmute yourself and ask the question as well, if that makes it better.
Oh yes, guys, ask please ask specific questions, not open-ended.
So when I asked quantity, I meant like the quantity of carbohydrates, protein that we should consume in a day. Like how to decide the exact quantity.
Oh dear, that is it's like saying, I'm shooting in the dark. It depends on the age, the condition, the problem. Is in an athlete, their lifestyle requirement, and so many guidelines that go into deciding that, right? So somebody who may not exercise may not need as much carbs at all, and you can even do carb-free meals if it is a non-exercising time. But if somebody is exercising, or leads quite a hectic schedule of running around, like I mostly sit all through the day, so it really depends on that. As a thumb rule, we know that an athlete can use about 7 to 10 grams of carbohydrate, can go up to 12 grams of carbohydrates if it's a demanding session. But otherwise, if somebody is looking to just manage weight, it can be even 5 grams carbohydrate per kg body weight. So on an average, if we say a 60 lady who's an adult, 60 kgs, 6 5s are
30.
My dear girl, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm 30.
So 6 5s is how much?
30.
Yeah, 300 grams of carbohydrates. Correct, na? 6 5s are?
Yeah.
So 60. So 60 kgs into 5 is, sorry, correct, no? I got it right, no?
Yes, yes, Geeta.
Yes.
So then you divide that much by the amount of carbohydrate intake. And carbs come from milk, dals, even, your non-starchy veggies and also your rice roti. On an average, one serving can give you 15 grams. So that's how you do the math.
Okay. Thank you.
And protein can go up if you are just sedentary, you may need 0.8 to 1. If you are an athlete, it can be 1.2 to anywhere touching up to 2 grams per kg body weight. Meaning 60 into 1.5 becomes 90 grams. And protein, if you eat 1 glass of milk, it's 7 grams. 1 egg is roughly 6 grams, and so on. 100 grams of chicken, roughly pure chicken weight is 25 grams. Fish is 19 grams, and so on. That's how you calculate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhagyashree. I hope this helped you a bit. We have another question on the chat. I think it's Sonali. Sonali, can you, Geetha requested, can you ask a more specific question? You have said banana mango kha sakte hain kya? So she's asking, can anybody eat banana mango? So
That is, I'm assuming there is in PCOS condition. Unfortunately, we can never say don't eat. So the idea of managing here is to consume mango and a banana in a mixed meal. For example, you can eat a mango after food, where mango alone is not going to lead to insulin spike, because when you add your proteins, you add your good fats. It could be avocado, olive oil, and choose oils also which are non-inflammatory. I told you, right? So don't choose like sunflower oil. So you can choose, say, an extra virgin olive oil is a salad dressing, or you can choose a cold pressed till oil, mustard oil in your cooking. So when you are consuming banana and mango, for example, it could be a salsa, or eat a piece after your food. You can or consume it with, say, a handful of soaked nuts, with a fruit that is not very high in sugar, meaning that you will eat it with, say, papaya or muskmelon. But don't add large volume. You have to add only small portion, which is just for a flavor. So eat the base, which becomes protein and good fat, like walnuts, 3 4 walnuts you can eat, and you can eat some, say an orange, and then add like one cheek of a mango.
Okay, ma'am.
Thank you, Sonali. I think there's a problem with the voice. So we have another question from Abhishek. He's asking how keto and the IF diet, I think, is the fasting, I think, diet affects PCOS.
Now, see, keto depends from where are you getting your keto, Baba. Now, if you are doing such high, fat, and there is already a problem with insulin resistance and inflammation. So you have to do things which are sustainable rather than doing intermittent fasting where you're fasting for 14, 16 hours. My suggestion will be at least do a 12 hours of a circadian rhythm style of a fasting, where you eat before sunset and try and eat only the first meal after 12 hours. I think that's more sustainable. Again, when intermittent fasting, please do understand that intermittent fasting has some promising results when people have been disciplined and are able to restrict their window period of eating and consume less calorie. But if you're able to eat the same over regular 12 hours, but still are able to plan your food in a way that doesn't impact your PCOS, in a way that leads to insulin spike, or you plan your meals judiciously, I think that with a decent amount of calorie restriction, you could get the same results. That is what intermittent fasting has proven, according to me.
And ma'am, so the people who are very highly insulin insensitive, they go on a keto diet, right? So if a PCOS person goes on a keto diet, how worse it could become?
Okay. Today we have conclusive data to say that high fat and low carbohydrate diets are not effective, meaning they're not helpful for athletes and for high performance. And that is why we call, by what our professors and research scientists have conclusively said, it is called train low, and compete in fed state. Meaning, for training adaptations, you can look at cutting carbohydrate from your intake either before or after your workout, but that is called a train low strategy, where you sleep without eating, so that your body deliberately is put through certain changes. But however, in the competition cycle, if you are an athlete, then we definitely suggest introducing back carbohydrates, because then performance is affected and it is not helpful.
Okay, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt, ma'am. I had another question. So you said 40 grams of soy a female can eat per day. So that's the
Up to
most upper
20.
limit.
American Heart Association says soy products are safe up to, especially if you're male, because the male hormone is testosterone. And I know that Indian, and not Indian, we know that Japanese and Asian diets have used soya products for a very long time, since we know of these cuisines. And they live off tofu, soy milk, tempeh, fermented paste as miso. So it is culturally a part of their meals. Whereas in India, we never ate tofu per se. It is not a part of our culture. But if you're a vegetarian and you need high quality protein, and because there's already dyslipidemia and PCOS, meaning that there is high cholesterol issue and inflammation. So tofu in many ways can add value. It can give you calcium. It can give you, phytoestrogen. It can lower your cholesterol because it has cholesterol lowering properties. So it really depends in context of who you are asking. Are you referring to male or female? Now, male sexual hormone is testosterone. So you don't want to go overboard, because soy-based products also have plant estrogen, right? The phytoestrogens.
Ma'am, I was referring to females because myself, I'm a vegan, so I've researched enough and I take myself enough product as a male. So I wanted to ask for female. You were telling that 40 grams is the most upper limit in a day
50.
for 50. Okay.
Because 20, what is saying? Up to 25, 26 grams of soy-based protein, no?
Okay.
Right? If you eat even 100 grams paneer, you will not get even paneer from milk will not even give me 7-gram protein. Whereas tofu and soy will give me a lot more, double, right?
Yeah, around 17.
Not double, a little more. Sorry, not double, but a little more.
Okay, thank you.
About 3, 4, 5 grams more. All right.
Thanks, Abhishek. We have another question from Diksha. Her question is, do dietary recommendations differ for lean PCOS?
Okay. Kindly tell me, what is this lean PCOS, Baba?
Diksha, do you want to unmute and maybe talk to Geetha?
Yeah, I think I came across something as that.
So a lean PCOS is when the the one who's suffering is not overweight, so they fall in the normal weight category, but they do suffer the other symptoms.
Okay, so now if they don't have any symptoms, I don't know what the dietary guidelines will be, but not everybody who goes to PCOS will be obese, just to clarify.
Okay.
Okay, but I have seen in some athletes where there is irregular menstruation, and you may definitely want to look and adapt to of these dietary guidelines to suit their need, meaning that if they have irregular menstruation, you don't want to do undercutting of calorie intake, because there is a way to ensure regular menstrual cycle. Around the time that you are expecting a menstruation, you definitely want to do training periodization. You don't want to put the body through cortisol or stress. You must look at mechanisms where you are giving them extra food and ensuring certain, estrogen foods, or in a way that there is a, you're ensuring regular menstrual cycle, because sometimes athletes don't get menstrual cycle over 2 months. That means what a typical lady could get on an average between 21 days or sometimes even 30 days or 30, a little more than 30 days, somebody may not get at all for over 2 months or 3 months. So it depends again on each one's condition. So yes, definitely these guidelines will apply to somebody who may not be going through obesity, but will go through PCOS condition, because there are some of these underlying parameters.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Diksha. So I don't see any more questions on the chat. We have time to maybe take one last question, if there is any. Anybody, Abhishek, do you want to ask a question? Please, yeah.
This is out of PCOS, ma'am, but as I was discussing, what's the daily upper limit soy protein a male can intake?
Okay, I just recollect going through the guidelines, and I understand that I think the guideline was for definitely a male also, because American Heart Association, I was just stumbling on the research on the upper limit of the soy-based products. And if you're vegan, you definitely have a challenge of getting high quality protein, right? Because dals are also carb heavy and you can't do large portion. So that leaves you only with sprouts, nuts, and left is soy products. So I think about 50 grams of fermented soy, which is tempeh, may be far better because it lowers anti-nutritional properties and can give you about those 20 or 25 grams of soy-based protein.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Abhishek seems to either love or hate soy.
No,
He's vegan, so he's in love with
I
it.
personally love soy. My favorite source is tofu. So yeah.
Nice, nice, awesome. So
All right.
fantastic. I think this was a great start to the nutrition series for Simply Periods with the webinars that we plan to do. We will be doing a lot more such webinars with Geetha because she comes with a lot of experience, both practical and in theory. My request to everybody here who has joined and people who are in our communities is that to tell us, what would you like us to also kind of go deeper into, right? And again, the whole idea here is to talk about female athletes specifically. Simply Period exists for female athletes and to kind of help female athletes and their support team to do better. So if there is anything else that comes to mind, of course, we will be from our team, we will be researching and putting up more exciting and interesting topics with experts like Geetha. But if you have anything on your mind that you would like us to touch upon in the next lectures that we are doing in nutrition, please do write to us, message us. You have our we have our website. You can go through the website and also contact us through there. But we would love to hear from you as to what more or on what topics would you like us to kind of keep taking these series on. So thank you so much, Geetha. Again, we have been around for some time now, and I'm hoping that this will just keep going a bit bigger and better. But thank you, Geetha, for joining us today. It was very, very informative, even for me, my team. I think Tanaz and Mansi are here, and I think it was very, very informative for us too. So thank you so much for joining us on a Sunday, that too. So thank you for making space for Simply Periods, and thank you for all the participants who were there all throughout, and for the questions. Of course, it really helps us get richer. So thank you. Always please remember that you can reach out to us through the website, through our Instagram page, message, look at the things that we're offering, the workshops that we do, all of that. All the information is available on our website, simplyperiods.org. Thank you, Geetha. Thank you again.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks a lot, Aditi, and the team and all the participants. Have a wonderful Sunday evening.
Yes, have a wonderful Sunday, everyone. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.